One of the most confusing parts of writing a research proposal or a thesis is figuring out the difference between a theoretical framework and a conceptual framework. Are they the same? Do you really need both? And where do they fit in your work? Hello there, I'm Abbas Isiaka and I'm your host at Academic Village. Today I'm going to break down this topic step by step, brick by brick. So we're going to be looking at one, what is a concept and what is a theory? What is a theoretical framework and what is a conceptual framework? How do they relate and where do they go in your research? And most importantly, how do you use them correctly in your thesis? And throughout this video, I'll also be showing you, I'll be using Albert Bandura's socio-cognitive theory to show you exactly how to apply these frameworks in a real research. But before we get started, I will appreciate if you can hit the subscribe button so you get notified when I drop a new video. And now, let's get to it. So, what is a concept? A concept is a basic unit of thought, an idea, or a category that we use to explain something. For example, you have motivation, self efficacy, or learning styles. All of these are concepts that we use in educational research. But it is very important to understand that the meaning of a concept cannot be determined with reference to everyday language. Its meaning has to be understood in the context of the conceptual or discursive network in which it is embedded and used, which means, in simple language, for instance, you cannot just uplift or approach a particular concept and just use it that way. You have to understand how that concept is being deployed in the everyday language or in a everyday language as well as in a discursive language. For instance, take structure, for instance. Structure could mean a lot of things in sociology or for different people. But structure in everyday language is structure. There's nothing more than structure. But when you look at that discursively, it means different things. So that is why a concept has to be discursively explored or understood. And a concept is not a theory. In other words, a concept in itself is not an explanation. Do you get that? A concept in itself is not an explanation. Although you can have concepts integrated into theories, and that takes us to the next question then. What is a theory? A theory is a structured set of concepts, emphasis on structured set, because they must sort of connect, they must interact, and that's why it refers to as a theory is said to be a structured set of concepts that explains relationships between variables or concepts. So in this case, we could test that theory. So a theory could be tested, it could be refined, and we could use a theory to predict, explain how and why things happen in the way they do. So, according to Vapio et al. In their work, they define a theory as an abstract, generalizable set of propositions that suggest explanations for some phenomenon. So, for example, Bandura's sociocognitive theory explains how learning occurs through observation, imitation, and social interaction. So, when you look at observation, imitation, and social interaction, these are concepts. But Bandura is using this concept to explain sociocognition or how learning happens. So that is how concepts are being embedded or integrated within a particular set of theories. Now that we understand concepts and theories, let's move to the big question. And that's what's the difference between a theoretical framework and a conceptual framework. So, a theoretical framework is the structure that supports a study derived from existing theories. So, you get your theoretical framework from existing theories, or what you could call hybridization, or what Jürgen Habermas would refer to as the hybridization of theories or a bricolage of theories. So in a theoretical framework, you're not expected to stick to just one theory. If you think a particular theory is not sufficient in explaining what you're trying to explain, then it's okay for you to shop around and look for theories that come together or sufficient enough to give a coherent explanation. But all you have to ensure is that there is an internal consistency between those two or three theories. So those theories must, be dialogue. They must be communicating in a way, or one should be complementary or supportive of the other. So that's how you can, blend or bring together two or more theories. So a theoretical framework in this case supports is a structure that you develop that supports a study derived from existing theories. So that's how you come about your theory. But then a conceptual framework usually emerge from a literature review, and it is a system of concepts that you as a researcher you'll have to construct to explain relationships in your study. So if you've got a couple of concepts that you're working with and you want to explain how they are related or connected, then for instance, until you give me a proper conceptual framework of how you're using terms or tools, I might find it difficult to understand how imitation is connected to observation. But when you bring them together in a conceptual framework, then it brings clarity to the relationship between imitation, observation, and self-efficacy. So that's you developing a conceptual framework, observing or highlighting the interactions between these concepts. So, a theoretical framework is a theory or set of theories guiding your research, and it gives a lens to interpret the data as well, because this is what you're going to use in the end as when you do your analysis to make sense of your data. And it also helps you understand the problem under review. So it helps you properly situate your problem or understand what you're addressing and what you're not addressing. And you develop this, as I've said, from established theories in your field, and you find this commonly used in quantitative and qualitative research. But for conceptual framework, you get them from relationships, you get them from literature reviews, as well as it helps you sort of link key variables in your study rather than relying solely on existing theories. So take for instance, you have used a blend of theories, about two or three theories, but they don't usually have the same conceptual landscape. I mean, they've got different things that they're arguing, pushing forward. But you can, for your own conceptual framework, this is at the point where you can, cherry pick, choose and select whatever you're interested in. So a particular theory might just give you one or two concepts, and a theory might help you understand three or four more concepts, or even give you no concept. Just it might just give you a methodological grounding somewhere there, but not essentially giving you concept. But when you start doing your analysis, you're going to come back and refer to this concept or this theoretical landscape or understanding. So this is how these two elements are really key in your analysis. They come together to form the basis of your analysis going forward, but they work in a very different way, given where you develop them from and the liberty you have on those theories. So at the point of writing or designing the study, you don't really have much to contribute to the theory. Later on in your findings, you might have something that disprove or approve or contribute to that theory, and then that's when you can make propositions that, okay, given the findings that I've been able to develop from this study, I can say that this is entirely true and this is not so. So this is how you can make contribution to existing knowledge, or in your case it could be developing new concept. So bear that in mind. And lastly, a conceptual framework is that system that gives you or your research a particular direction, because it defines the variables that you're interested in. It also highlights the relationships between the variables and gives you a research direction, and it comes from the specific focus and the research problem of your study, because anyone can pick up Bandura's theory and look at it differently from how you're going to look at it. So, and later on, we're going to see how a particular concept could be used in different uh, research, study, or design in different way. So, how do you apply the two frameworks? You've got the theoretical framework and the conceptual framework. How do you use them in real life? Now, this is what we're going to do now. I'm going to take a topic, and the topic here is how students develop confidence in online learning. And our theoretical framework in this case is going to be Bandura's socio-cognitive theory, because you have to justify why you're choosing a theory, and that's because he helps it explains how people learn by observing others and how self-efficacy impacts on behavior. So this is our justification for Bandura. And then, as well, you might know, you have to also design your study, your research method, your data collection must also align with this line of assumption. Okay, so you must develop tools that will help you, say, observe someone learning or be in an online learning environment in a way, or interview people who have participated in an online session. So you need to develop your methods in a way that follow this line of assumption that you have in this theoretical framework. So, and now the next thing, but when it comes to conceptual framework, it is largely our creation. You have the leeway, you have the liberty based on your research questions to choose and pick what concept you're interested in. Or even depending on the context you're working in, you might be leaning to a particular set of tools or concepts. So to then follow through with our topic, our research topic, to develop a conceptual framework for that study sample, we can develop three different approaches. So the first one is the theoretical model, the theoretical lens model. So that means we're drawing entirely from the way the tools that have been used in that theory to develop our conceptual framework. So we're not really moving away from the conceptual tools available in our theory. So we're leaning towards that. So, and the second one is the cause and effect module, which is looking at relationship, and I'm going to explain that later on. And the third one is the input and output module, more like the system approach or the logic approach model. And let me break them down. So let's look at the theoretical lens model, which is simply a way of showing how a theory helps you understand the variables in your study. So you're using a theoretical lens to further explain the tools or the concepts in that study. So taking the socio-cognitive theory, Bandura's theory as that lens, Estes, Bandura proposes that people learn and develop beliefs like confidence through observing others, their own experiences, and social interactions. So your model is showing. So what we're doing with this model now is that we're showing that there is an interaction between observational learning, self-efficacy, and confidence in online learning. So this is the assumption that Bandura is making, that okay, if you watch instructors or you watch your peers or you watch an online demonstration, you're able to see how people solve problems, how others engage in online learning, and how others succeed in tasks. So this exposure is expected to give you some clues about what is possible. So this is the very tenet of observational learning. These are the assumptions underpinning observational learning. And then, given that you've seen all of this happening, and it is expected to impact on your belief that you can do this too because you've seen others doing it. And according to Bandura, self-efficacy grows when students successfully complete tasks, or you see peers succeeding, or you've observed people doing something. So you can observe others directly. So when you observe people doing something, you can improve your self efficacy because you see yourself in that light and think, okay, I can do this too. Or you've seen your peers, succeeding, getting a degree, or doing a particular performing a particular action or changing jobs easily through online learning. So you think, I can do this as well. So this is the assumption under the self-efficacy or the belief that yes, when you see people do something, you tend to be in that mindset of possibility of I can do this as well. And given that, or given this background, there is an assumption that all of this would improve your confidence in taking out a course on Udemy or doing taking LinkedIn course or whatever. So this definitely, once your self efficacy increases, you begin to feel that yes, I'm more capable of navigating online platforms and also participating in virtual classes or seeing that yes, it's actually happening. It could happen. Learning could happen in digital environments. So this is how your confidence becomes really an outcome shaped by earlier psychological processes of observing and believing. So this is the assumption. This is the module we are building, and these are the concepts we're going to be exploring as we speak to people, as we read literature materials, or as we look at data, or as we try and look at interaction between these three elements. So these are the concepts you are going to be developing for going forward. But they are concepts you're taking from the theory and applying them to a particular context or a particular research problem. So this module is best for studies that are focusing on psychological or social learning processes, such as student confidence, or we're trying to understand motivation, why people do what they do, or you want to understand behavioral change, or online learning experiences, or technological adoption through what people do and help. So this is the module you can use in those cases. But given what you're interested in, some people might be interested, those that are interested in technology adoption might not really be keen about observational learning. So depending on what you're interested in, that will determine what tools or what concepts you're going to take on board. So the next one is the cause and effect module, which is showing how factors interact in research study. And if you're familiar, there are a lot of variables in every study, and it depends on where they are or what degree of power that variable has. And you could have independent variables, you have dependent variables, and then you have the mediating or sort of the intervening variables. And in this case, the independent variables, which we see as the causes, have the capacity to make things to happen. So these are the variables that influence or predict confidence in online learning. And you could have quality of instruction or digital literacy. So these represent what students experience or bring with them that might affect their outcomes. And then you have the dependent variable, which are sort of the main outcome of your study or what your study is really interested in. And in this case, we are interested in confidence in online learning. So this is what you're trying to explain or understand. And that within those two poles of independent and dependent, you also have the mediating or slash moderating variables. And these are variables that have the capacity to shape or change the relationship between the causes and the effect. So they are sort of intervening in a way. And this could include social support or self regulation. In their case, they may strengthen or weaken or explain how independent variables influence confidence. And in some studies, all of these variables are taken care of. So, what this model is trying to tell us is that quality of instruction and digital literacy, they have the capacity to influence confidence in online learning, but social support, I mean, the kind of support people receive, say the kind of environment they live, the kind of house they stay, the kind of internet or the contextual environment they are in, And also the kind of post in the air that, I mean, that's the individual factor, uh, which could be through self-regulation, play an important role in the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. So, and this, as you can see, is a classical uh, example of a conceptual framework that we normally use in behavioral or educational research. So, in this case, we're looking at the input and output module, similar to the says the logic approach or the system approach. And what it's trying to say is that we trying to explain how what goes in to get something out. So what are the what is the, I mean, sort of linear anyway, but it explains the process by which an output gives you a certain outcome. And in this module, the first thing you have to understand is the input. And if you translate this into our topic, which is trying to understand how uh, online learning improves confidence, or how students develop confidence in online learning, and things like learning resources, the virtual learning environment, or the learning management system platform, or the instructor support, these are what will provide the foundation for students' online learning experience. So these are the inputs. And next is the process stage. That is how things are happening. And students will engage these input through activities such as participation, peer interaction, and overall engagement. And also, we are expecting that with this engagement with the inputs would lead to a certain set of outputs, and which in our case, which what we're interested in, is the student's confidence in online learning. So we believe that if we have an interaction between the input and the process, we should have a certain kind of output. And in this case, we are interested in students' confidence in online learning. And finally, you have the outcome. And this outcome goes a step further and tells us how this confidence contributes to broader academic success. Because one thing is to have a confidence in online learning, another thing is having a good outcome, getting a good degree, or progressing in your study, or for that student progressing in their study, or for them getting a certain grade, or overall academic degree or something. So this is the outcome. So you could liken output and outcome with, say, objectives and goal. So objectives in the short term and goals in the long term. So this is just a sort of this subtle difference between an output and an outcome. So this module shows how Bandura's theory could be represented using the system approach. And this approach is best suited for, say, if you're doing a program evaluation or a policy study in educational research. This is where you commonly see that, okay, are we, when we're trying to measure or evaluate the value for money, or you want to ascertain that your intervention is really working, this is how you can apply Bandura to this kind of concept. So the next question you want to ask yourself is, where do they go in your thesis or in your dissertation? And as Rocco and Plakotnik explain, a conceptual framework gives you a system of concept that allows you to make connections between different aspects of your study. And these modules demonstrate different ways to structure that system depending on your research approach. So we can be using the same theory or have a same similar theoretic framework, but we are taking different approaches to a particular study, a particular problem. That means our conceptual framework is going to be different. So that's why conceptual frameworks are always, the creation of the researcher. And that's why you don't have to copy and paste any conceptual framework. If you see an existing framework within the field that is not really addressing the questions you're interested in, you have the power as a researcher to take a detour and go somewhere else. So where do they go in your thesis, as I've asked? Usually I would have my theoretical framework in the methodological section, or you create a new or a dedicated chapter for it. a chapter where you can dedicate a chapter to your theoretical framework, clear and say, okay, instead of adding it under methodology, you can say chapter 3 theoretical framework and chapter 4 methodology. But the logic or the logic behind that is that it is expected that your theoretical framework will inform your methodology. So your methodology should build on your theoretical framework because that's what you're building your analysis on. So there must be coherence. There must be a connection between your theoretical framework and your methodology. And then your conceptual framework, because you develop a conceptual framework largely from your literature review, from what concepts people have been using. And in your literature review, you've also, you know, done some conceptual clarifications. So it's better to put a conceptual framework within the literature review section because it's not too far away and people are already familiar with the concept and they can easily see how you've come to bring them together and make them connect. So this is where I would put a conceptual framework, and also understand that um, a theoretical framework is like the foundation of the house. That's the way I'll think about it, and your conceptual framework is like the blueprint for a specific. So just like a house plan or something. That's what a conceptual framework is. It's one that sort of says, oh, the door connects to the window, or the room one connects to room two in this way. So that's, but you need it too to be able to understand your study and develop a well structured research. So, and here we are. If you think this video has helped clarify the difference between a conceptual framework and a theoretical framework, do let me know in the comment section. And if you're working on your PhD or research proposal, let me know as well what's your biggest struggle with frameworks. Yeah, we like frameworks, and let's talk about it. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Academic Village for more research tips and valuable academic discussion. Thank you, and I will see you on the flip side.